Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Kat and I'm going to be referring to our little community here as Curious Kitties. And this is a space where we look at the unexplainable, the strange, and the mysteries of the world with an open mind and no judgment. These are allegedly true stories that have not been confirmed. I am sharing them solely for entertainment purposes, so go ahead, grab a drink or a snack of choice, settle in, and let's get curious. Today I have a story about a family bond that seems to have completely crossed over the lines we don't fully understand. This comes from a Reddit user named BattleRazzle01, and honestly it really made me think about how people we love might still be looking out for us even after they're gone. So back in March of 2015, this user's father had just passed away about a month earlier, and because of the grief they weren't really sleeping well. They were staying up later and later into the night. They mentioned that when their dad was alive, he used to always give them a hard time about staying up so late and telling them it was ruining their sleep schedule and messing with their work, just standard parenting stuff. Well, one night it's about 2:30 in the morning and they're sitting up watching videos when suddenly the power in the house flickers. They check out the window, but there's no storm, no wind, nothing. A few minutes later, the power goes completely out for a second time and comes right back on. But here's where it gets really strange, like nothing resets. Usually when the power cuts, your electronics have to reboot, but everything just stayed exactly as it was. A few minutes later, the power goes out for a third time. This time it's out for almost a whole minute. They look out the window and they notice the street lights are still on, all the neighbors' houses have power, it's literally just their house in the dark. When the lights finally come back on, the video they were watching just picks up right where it left off. The clocks haven't reset at all. It was exactly 2:37 a.m. It audibly said, "Okay," and decided it was finally time to get some sleep. Well, they wake up in the morning and they're getting ready for work and their phone says it's 7:23 a.m. But when they look at the oven clock, it reads 11 something. This is the part that will give you chills. It was around 11 a.m. that their father had left the house on the day that he passed away. And it doesn't really stop there. Fast forward a few years later to the anniversary of his passing. They're living in a completely new home, but they're still struggling to sleep and they're staying up late watching TV, and then right on cue the power flickers and goes out. So this time they immediately said, "Okay, I'm going to bed," and the power cuts back on. Next morning they walk into the kitchen and the oven clock is sitting right at 11:41 a.m. It makes you think that maybe just some habits die hard and their dad just really didn't like them staying up past their bedtime. Our next story starts off looking like a typical spooky camping trip, but it turns into a complete mystery that honestly gave me chills. This comes from Reddit user named RyanB789. So back when Ryan was 19, he had just started his freshman year at a college in Boston, and he was sharing a dorm room with two guys named Aaron and Noah. They'd all been living together for about 4 months. Ryan said he became close with them pretty quickly. Aaron and Noah actually knew each other from high school, so Ryan was technically the new guy, but they made him feel very included. Well, Aaron and Noah were really into the paranormal scene, and since Ryan loved that stuff too, they suggested taking a trip over winter break. They decided on going to the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, which is famous for its ghost stories and urban legends. Ryan was super excited and even invited one of his close friends from home, who was also named Ryan, to come along. They all made a group chat, planned it out, and his friend Ryan even met the roommates ahead of time so that nobody felt like a stranger. When the day finally came, they ended up leaving around 3 in the afternoon. Since it was winter, it got dark by like 5 o'clock, so leaving that late was a bit strange. Ryan actually wanted to leave earlier, but Aaron insisted on a later start, claiming he just wasn't a morning person. Now Ryan thought this was odd because Aaron was usually the very first one awake in the dorm every day, but he didn't want to overthink this at the time, so he just went with it. About 4 hours into the drive, they were deep in the middle of nowhere. It was pitch black, and Noah, who was driving, suddenly pulls over on this isolated one-way road surrounded by thick wood, saying he had to use the restroom. Well, Aaron decided to go with him. Now, Ryan and his friends stayed in the car, and they were just chatting, waiting around. But after about 10 minutes passed, they started getting a little bit worried because the guys hadn't come back yet. They figured that their roommates were probably just trying to prank them or play a joke, so they decided to step out of the car, call their names, Well, right as they closed the car doors behind them, they heard the distinct sound of locks clicking shut, and they were completely locked out in the freezing cold. And remember, Noah has the keys. At this point, they were just really annoyed, assuming that Aaron and Noah were hiding nearby, using the key fob to mess with them. So they decided to walk into the woods in the direction the guys went to go and find them. They walked pretty far out to the point where they couldn't even see the car anymore, and suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, a chainsaw cranks up to their left, and a person in a black hoodie starts running directly toward them. Terrified, both Ryans sprinted back to the road, but when they got out of the trees, the car was completely gone. They knew they were in the exact right spot because there was a very distinct, uniquely shaped boulder right by the roadside. With the car gone and a chainsaw echoing in the distance, they just started running down the dark road, hoping for a miracle. Now, after running for about a mile, they got lucky and a driver pulled over and picked them up. He drove them to a nearby small town where they immediately called the police. Ryan gave the officers Aaron and Noah's names and details, assuming his roommates were either missing or in serious danger. But when the police came and ran their names, absolutely nothing came up. Ryan explained that they all went to the same college and shared a dorm. Well, the police arranged to transport the two Ryans back to Boston and planned to follow up the next morning. But when they walked back into their dorm room, all of Aaron and Noah's belongings were completely gone. There wasn't a single trace that anyone else had lived there. And when the police investigated the school records the next day, the college had absolutely no record of Aaron or Noah ever attending the school. It turned out that the roommates had used completely fake names, fake identities, and pretended to be college students for 4 whole months, all just to gain Ryan's trust and lure him out into the middle of nowhere. The police never found out who they actually were, and honestly, it just makes you realize how thankful we should be that Ryan and his friend made it out of those woods safely. Okay, so our next story takes us back to the late 1990s, and honestly, it is the exact kind of mystery that makes you just want to double check the locks on your own doors tonight. This comes from Reddit user named Worth_Biscotti_5070. So, back when this user was 15 years old, they begged their parents to let them stay home alone for the very first time while their parents went out for a rare date night. Their little brother was spending the night at their grandparents' house, so they finally had the whole place to themselves. They were super excited for the freedom, and they had a pizza in the oven, a stack of rented VHS movies by the TV, and total control of the house. At first they were having a great time, leaving all the lights on, playing movies as loud as they wanted, eating some popcorn straight out of the bag. They were just having a blast. But around 9 p.m., the first movie ended, and this heavy silence settled over the house. That kind of deep quiet where every single little noise starts sounding a little bit eerie. They got up and started to rewind the tape, and right as they pushed the VHS into the player, they heard a very soft metal scraping sound coming from the front door. Now, it sounded exactly like someone patiently trying different keys in the lock. They froze, hoping it was just their parents coming home early, but the scraping was slow and quiet, like whoever it was wasn't knocking or calling out. Then the scraping stopped, and the doorknob slowly turned just enough to make a distinct clicking sound. Naturally, they were terrified. They grabbed the cordless phone from the coffee table. Their hands are shaking so badly, like they couldn't even think straight. They're trying to decide, should they call for help, or are they just overreacting to normal house sounds? So to see what was happening, they just crept over to the front window, very carefully parted the thick curtains, just a fraction of an inch to peek out. And guys, the porch light was completely bright. The porch was illuminated, but it was completely empty. Like there was no car, there's no shadow, there's nobody standing there. But right as they're staring out at the empty porch, the doorknob right in front of them turns again. They were literally sitting there watching the metal move and heard the latch rattle with absolutely no one on the other side of the glass. They scream and they stumble backward and they immediately call 911. The police and their parents arrived really quickly after this, but a thorough search of the yard, the bushes, and the lock showed absolutely nothing. Like there's no footprints outside, there's no pry marks on the door, and eventually everyone just convinced themselves that a teenager home alone had just gotten spooked by an overactive imagination, and for years, they tried to believe that too. Now, years later, their parents finally sold the house, and the new owners only lived there for about 6 months before the wife ran into this user's mother at a local grocery store. They were doing, just the standard polite small talk when the new owner casually mentioned that they were already moving out and trying to sell the place. When this user's mother asked why, the woman laughed it off and just said, it's the strangest thing. We keep hearing someone trying to unlock the front door at night. It starts with like this scraping sound, and then the doorknob starts shaking a little bit. And so the mother's feeling her whole body go cold as this woman is saying all this stuff that corroborates with what this user was hearing and seeing before. And everyone thought it was nothing. Well, now this woman says, every single time we look outside, there is never anyone standing on the porch. So, this story, honestly, it just makes you wonder what was really trying to get inside that house, or if it was just trying to make sure everyone knew it was already there. Okay, so our final story tonight brings us into a small apartment building with a mystery that lingers long after you move out. This comes from a Reddit user named Last Hallway, and honestly, it is the perfect reminder of how some spaces just seem to hold on to the past. So this user lived alone in a small, older apartment building with pretty thin walls. Around midnight, almost every single night, they would hear the distinct sound of footsteps walking down the hallway outside their front door. At first, they didn't think twice about it. It's an apartment building and people come home late all the time, right? But one night, the footsteps didn't just pass by. They stopped dead right outside their apartment door. The user waited, expecting to hear a neighbor unlocking a door or rustling with keys, but nothing happened. Someone was just standing there in absolute silence. After about 30 seconds, the footsteps started up again, but guys, it didn't sound like they were moving down the hall anymore. It sounded like they were pacing right inside the apartment. Terrified, they got up and they checked every single room. The place was completely empty. Now, they try to brush it off and they tell themselves it had to be a weird echo or it's the neighbors next door. But a few nights later, it happens again. The moment the footsteps paused outside, this user went straight to the door and they looked through the peephole. The hallway was totally empty, but as they were standing there, still looking through the glass, they suddenly hear the slow, heavy sound of footsteps walking directly behind them inside their own living room. They whip around, but again, there's nothing there. Eventually, this became this bizarre, unsettling routine every single night. Now, they stopped telling people about it because their friends are just laughing it off. But then, one weekend, their sister came to stay over. Now, they didn't want to mention anything about this to their sister because they didn't want to freak her out. But right around midnight, their sister looks up from her phone and she's like, "Who is walking around?" So their stomach completely drops, and when they ask her what she means by this, she said it sounded like someone wearing heavy boots was walking straight from the bedroom into the kitchen. So they get up and they're searching the apartment together, but they find nothing. And her sister is actually so freaked out about this that she refuses to stay another night. She cuts her stay short. Now, about a month later, they finally went to their landlord and they are asking, has anyone ever passed away in the unit? The landlord looks visibly uncomfortable and admits that years ago, an old man had passed away there of natural causes. But then he looks at them and he asks, have you been hearing footsteps around midnight? He told them that literally every single tenant who had ever lived in that apartment for more than a few months eventually came to him asking the exact same question. No one ever saw a thing, they just heard the footsteps. So this user did move out shortly after this, and they've been in a new, completely quiet apartment for about a year now. But the creepiest part is that every now and then, right around midnight, they still wake up out of nowhere, and for just a few seconds, they swear they can hear those footsteps pausing right outside their new door before they completely fade away. That's where we're going to leave things for tonight. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and listening. If you've enjoyed these stories, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow our little cozy corner of the internet. Now let me know down in the comments which of these stories gave you the biggest chills, or if you've ever experienced something unexplainable yourself. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have your own true paranormal or non-paranormal creepy experiences, I would absolutely love to hear them. You can send them over to me at curiouscatstories@gmail.com. That's curiouscatstories@gmail.com. Please let me know in your email if you would prefer to remain anonymous, or if there is a specific fake name you'd like me to use if I share your story on the channel. This is a safe space, and your comfort is always a top priority here, guys. Just take care of yourselves, stay safe, and to all my curious kitties, stay curious. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.